Hi, everyone. I'm Jan Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We are an ecosystem of brands for women, by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. You're here with us today watching our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show brought to you each and every Tuesday. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and join us at joinmayshad.com, where you too can learn more about the ways in which you can join us as we together revolutionize the way that professional women connect, engage, and do business together. So we have an excellent show lined up for you today. I personally love talking about all things related to the environment and sustainability and the empowerment of women. And no better other guest star to have this conversation with than Tahera Hamdani. Hi, Tahera. Welcome.
Hey, Jen.
Hi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
So you are the Chief Strategy Officer at a company called Regenerative Resources. I would love to learn about what is the mission and the passion behind the work that you do with Regenerative Resources.
Sure. So Regenerative Resources is working towards creating a for-profit model around transforming degraded and desertified lands into productive ecosystems. So it's truly taking that triple bottom line concept of people, planet, and profit and proving it out in a space where we have, at this point, 9 billion acres of degraded land. And degraded land is basically land that we can grow nothing on. That's just become infertile over time. And the area that we specifically focus on is around coastal degradation, so land that's gotten desertified near the coast, using something really cool called seawater agriculture. So it's actually using seawater for agriculture and aquaculture and agroforestry as opposed to our freshwater resources. The mission is to really bring this amazing knowledge of indigenous native systems around the world. Mangroves, which is the primary agroforestry that we do, is extremely critical to the coastal biodiversity and the coastal ecosystem. And it's just bringing it more to the forefront and popularizing it and having lots and lots of forests.
I'm interested to know, in the context of the work that you do, we talk a lot about climate change right now, and particularly the effects of it in the intersectionality of climate change with COVID. What are you seeing? What's coming up for you as some of your biggest aha moments that you've experienced in your work in the last 7 months?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really brought even more to the forefront the sense of urgency around doing this, right? And what's beautiful is the resilience of our natural ecosystems. For example, when it comes to natural flood protection, which is something that all of our coastal cities and coastal lands are really at the risk of, including Manhattan, right? And we can do natural building and continue to evolve on that. When I say natural building, I mean we can do build solutions around it, like build walls and all of that, but they're just not going to sustain, and they're just not enough because they don't have that intelligence of life and its evolutionary systems. And that's what the mangroves have, right? So even with amazing tech that we've been doing over so many years, there's still so much amazing tech in the natural solutions. And I think especially, we've got COVID, but it's also been these natural disasters that we've been hit with. We were talking about a hurricane in this region of the Northeast, the fires. And this is something that goes multi-generational to create deep stability. And I think that's what it's got to be, right? It's not just quickly reacting with climate change. We need these deep solutions that are going to provide resilience over a long period of time.
So much is happening in 2020. Where do we begin? How many hours do we have?
Right.
When you think about the effects of the pandemic and what that has brought to light, brought to surface, and you think about, all the hurricanes, and we have a record number of hurricanes that have, and we're not even through hurricane season yet, right? We're still, by the time that this show airs, we're still not even out of hurricane season. And then we think about the fires on the West Coast. And at what point do you, this is now that I'm formulating this in my mind, thinking this is such a ridiculous question, but, are you concerned with what you're seeing? Because I think that there's still a perception that, that there's still so much that we can do to reverse climate change and the effects of it. But this year in particular, we're just seeing so much impact. And I'm wondering, how does that, number one, impact the work that you do? And then number two, at what point do we really need to really seismically shift how we even think about sustainability and climate change?
Yeah. I think one of the things that this really highlighted was our food supply chains, right? And all of a sudden, people, where you really relied on big grocery stores and stuff, when we, and being in the New York City, New Jersey region where this hit us first in this country, there was this fear of even going into the grocery stores, and something that we very much took for granted, right? And so there is this high level of disruption that is getting personalized, which I think climate change, even though it is so personal to all of us and to our future generations, I don't think it's really been hitting home, right? It's sort of been left in the realm of the scientists and the folks in the UN and the governments, and it's like taking this personal responsibility of understanding that I am supposed to be, and not that, and we've also vilified ourselves quite a lot in this conversation of climate change. That's what excites me really about the work that I'm involved in, is because humans get to be the superheroes again and really lead charge. And this requires for our deep wisdom of many, many years to come forth, right? Our solution specifically, for example, we can't do anything just pushing out technology onto those lands. It's all about the people on those lands willing to come back as stewards because they have a deep love for it. And I think when something hits home that much and we're facing it, like, again, the truth is, even though we're sat here and we're looking at the California fires, it's different than the Californians who are sat there experiencing it. And so we're getting hit in different ways. Mm-hmm. So as to hope that those different ways something will hit, into the psyche deeper than it has so far with climate change. Yeah. So.
Well, and there's such an interlocking nature of how we think about it. And I know that you talk about this too, about like local customs and local cultures and ecological functions and just wealth. And, when we think about often, everything from, forest clearing to deforestation to the way in which land is degraded, we have a perception in our mind about who's doing that. But it's also about the work you do also ensures that, that local communities actually have a different skill set and a different knowledge and a different way by which to actually ensure that they're generating wealth for themselves and for their generations to come as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we sort of have to move out of, as important as conservation is, which we have to stop the bleeding, right? And that's what conservation does. For example, half of our world's mangroves are gone. And you can only sustain or conserve that which you have. And today we have the knowledge to regenerate. So we need to get on that mindset much more when it comes to our ecological and large ecosystems, right? And the incentivization to regenerate comes from this deep need, or it's from the deep loss that those local communities have faced, whether it's of their own customs and traditions, whether it's of the rural wealth, whether it's their own kids not wanting to be there anymore, and this urban flight. And it's interesting, right? Because COVID's even showing reversal of those patterns now, where properties in upstate New York are more independent. So, I think it absolutely has to happen with those local customs, with that indigenous patterns in mind. And we have this we're in an amazing time where it's creating the new indigenous patterns, right? So while we only bring back mangroves in regions where there traditionally have been mangroves, for example, and I'm talking about millions of mangrove trees, right? The knowledge still exists within those people of how to take care of their ecosystems. And that's that stewardship of wanting to preserve something. When you saw it, even if you haven't seen it with your own eyes, but somewhere in your lineage, those used to be thriving systems, and that gets passed down to us. That's what you want to recreate again. That's the will that allows for regeneration. It's not the knowledge and the tech only, so.
Did you have one or two aha moments during the course of your career because you've worked with some incredible, very large, very well-known companies like PwC, Deutsche Bank, Bearing Point, IBM. Mm-hmm. And two-part question for you. Number one, what were the aha moments in your own career trajectory or your own personal journey that led you to want to shift into the work that you do now? And number two, given the fact that you've worked with some exceptionally well-respected big companies, what did that work help prepare you for in the work that you do now?
So I think one of the biggest aha moments for me was 4 years back when I shifted out of working. I was living and working on Wall Street at the time, and I have been raised in extremely urban environments. I grew up in Dubai, and then I lived in Manchester, which prides itself on being a very industrial city. I studied engineering, and then I worked in financial systems primarily. So there are all these large, amazingly mature systems and industries that almost sort of are a crowning glory of the Industrial Revolution, right? And it's been amazing to be part of that because there's so much. There is a lot of, I think, for at least in the recent past, like I said, that's been a crowning glory. And I got to work in some of the finest of that crowning glory. And yet it's like watching sort of a bit of a crumbling empire, right? And knowing that it's time to shift. And for me, one of the aha moments was I lost a very dear friend to cancer. In a matter of 6 months from her diagnosis, she's gone. My age, she worked with the United Nations. And all of a sudden, I just started really looking deeper into food and our cultural patterns around food and how we commune around it, how we produce it, and looking at it as a whole system. And I really deeply felt that the fracturing of our communities has led to the fracturing of the culture part of agriculture. And we went from agriculture to agribusiness with a lot of loss to that culture. And I knew that in the repair work that we had ahead of us to move us towards a healthier society where we were all in charge of our own wellness, which was more holistic and integrated than the current way it's become, required that bringing together of the community and that healing. And so that aha moment came. It was like a flashing billboard to me, almost internal flashing billboard. And I completely shifted out and I went on a journey to learn around things like permaculture and regenerative agriculture and agroecology and understanding how food is such a powerful tool and driver of change. And so that was definitely one of my big aha moments. The other key one was also in over less than 4 years. So I left England when the dot-com bubble burst was hitting England, and that's when I left IBM. And Bearing Point declared Chapter 11 when the financial services industry was was going through its major recession in '08. I had worked with the Lehman Brothers 6 months prior to that, and I was seeing these massive things sort of falling to waste. And in that all of us have this capacity for regeneration. So I two key points in less than 4 years, I'd seen these massive recessions in my industry that very personally affected me in my job and my career. And each time I felt like I landed better and stronger. And so in that death, in that destruction, is the possibility for the rebirth and the regeneration. And that's been amazing. It's amazing to watch your own power of regeneration.
Thank you, first of all, for sharing. And I can't help but think about so much of what you just said really resonates and comes up often in the conversations we have now and have had over the last 7 months, right? In the sense of, really thinking through what institutions, what systems, what infrastructures were in place that are no longer going to meet the needs of what needs to come next. And you referenced, the dot-com bubble burst and then the Great Recession, and what two really interesting to be in the heart of the industries that were thriving the most during that period of time. And then to see both of those burst really right in a very quick fashion, that's what many of us are experiencing right now too. And I'm wondering, for the work that you're doing with your company from a strategy perspective, then how is COVID potentially shifting the work that you had already set out to do for 2020? And what does 2021 look like for you and for the company?
So in some ways, I think my partners and I had and hold this vision that was even sort of that COVID has shone a light on, and it's actually worked in our favor, right? Because we could be standing on our soapboxes talking about, no, look at the state of the industrial food system, blah, blah, blah. And then you get something like this, and it's like, boom, it's a real shake up and a real wake up call. For us, one of our co-founders got COVID, and he's our main person on the ground in Mexico, which is going to be our first project. So it very directly hit us, right? And it put a hold on our work. Our CEO right now is in Saudi, but we couldn't travel for many months over there as well. He just arrived a couple of days back. So when you do work that's like so based in the field on the land, and you have something like this where we all kind of go way more inwards, sheltering in place, it definitely affected us quite literally and quickly. However, it's contextualized us. That the larger context is what we've been holding. And interestingly enough, this work of seawater agriculture happened, and our co-founders had done it in Eritrea 20 years back. But we were kind of ahead then. Carbon markets didn't exist. People didn't have this same sense of like, oh, we only have this much time. Even though we were trying to pass that message on at the same time, saying freshwater resources are going away. We need, like, mangroves fix the most carbon out of any terrestrial ecology, right? So it's interesting that you bring up this idea of the right time and how has COVID affected that timing. So in some ways, it's funny because the machinery of the American corporations being set up or entrepreneurship, that's still kind of just been ongoing through all of this, right? And so that aspect has been going on. But we're back in the field now, and I think people have been contextualized in this even and grounded in this even more so to sort of, we may have been ahead of the game before, we may have been ahead even now, sort of forming this and wanting this. But there's definitely enough people joining the thought process and the movement, and then there's been even more now. So I think COVID has definitely helped bring into focus questions around sustainability and food sustainability.
before the show, you and I were talking about some of the regional differences that you've experienced, because through the pandemic, you've spent significant chunks of time in Phoenix and Palm Springs. Now you're back in New Jersey, and it's going to be so interesting to watch the show, not just in a few weeks when it airs, but then like months later, because you and I are having this conversation right now before the election.
Yeah.
And by the time that the show airs, the election will have happened. But yet, and so part of why I get really excited about shooting these shows a few weeks out is that, in a way, we're kind of using them as mini time capsules where, in 6 months, in a year, maybe in 10 years, we'll go back and we'll watch this content. And hopefully, what we're doing here at Mayshad not just serves to help, empower women socially, politically, economically, from a civic society perspective, but honestly, for us to also use this time to really hopefully learn something that we don't forget, right? Because when we think about, the internet 1.0 bubble burst, and we think about the Great Recession, and we think about 9/11, and we think about like all of the other horrific things that are happened nationally and globally, we all have very short attention spans now. We tend to forget, right?
Yeah.
So I really hope that this content really serves as a very strong reminder of what it was really like to go through this period of time, because, we're now 7 months into it, which is really hard to believe. Anyway, so you and I are now having this conversation before the election. And you, like we were talking about, have lived in different places in the last 7 months. Like, talk to us a bit about, the work that you do and some of the geographical differences you may notice, even just domestically, in the sense of the acceptance or understanding or just education and informative perspective of helping to understand how all the different issues that we really grapple with as a country today are really evident in the work that you do.
Yeah. And it's, because I've been in Oregon and Puerto Rico, and in, as you said, Palm Springs, Arizona, Jersey, and starting it from New Jersey and New York City, where it hit us the worst. It's definitely a very diverse set of attitudes and responses. And even when I'm almost talking about this sense of urgency, but I don't look like there aren't like red lights going off behind me, right? We're sort of talking in the comfort of our home. and that's kind of how it's been too, like this, a little bit of this armchair response of urgency because of how we've created comfort in this country and worked hard for it. And so, even in Arizona, when I was in Mesa and Scottsdale and Phoenix, or in Mesa in the house that I was in, the sprinklers go off full on, and there is, and it's a desert, right? It's not the natural. And I went down closer to the Sonoran region in Tucson, and they're actually bringing in tiered water charges and things of that nature. And I think, there is definitely these differences that are becoming even louder right now. And with the work that we're doing too, if we hit a point where 40% of the world becomes climate refugees, we don't have the patience or the mentality or the right creativity anymore to be able to regenerate, right? We'll just be like running here, there, and everywhere, trying to stop the bleeding and triaging everything. And so it's such a short period of time. Puerto Rico, when I was there, it's like it got hit by the hurricanes, and then I landed in Jersey and it was getting hit over here. This is the same hurricane. I mean, that's wild. There's been so much destruction of their ecosystems. 90+% of their food has to come off the island, and what that creates. And so if we're not able to watch New York City and relate it in Arizona, watch Puerto Rico and relate the same hurricane in New York, then we're just losing this valuable information that's being passed to us, right? And so that's sort of, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And I think US has so much, and I've been in environments of working with different entrepreneurs through these periods as well, and different perspectives from how the solutioning gets to look like. And we have this rich diversity, and but it's the relational aspect, the relatability that needs to increase so that we can tap into it more.
You've lived overseas when you were working in the corporate sector as well. Talk to us about living as an expat and what was that like for you? And I can't help but think about, the comment you made about like 40% of the world's population could become environmental, cultural refugees. It's so fascinating to think about like how simultaneously we've been so much more local because of the pandemic, but yet so much global in the sense of kind of the intersectionality and interrelatedness of everything. And the fact that, you and I, even though we're, geographically pretty close together, could be sitting on opposite ends of the world right now having a conversation thanks to technology, right? So there's so much to think about in terms of innovation in the future, but would love to learn more about your own life learning lessons as you lived the life of an expat.
Mm-hmm. Life of an expat, and especially because I grew up in UAE, the United Arab Emirates, which is a very young country. It only got established in 1972. And then moving through different continents, and as you said, through my work, being in different places too, I think the amazing part of it is you just have this international perspective, because you're, even as a kid, watching and observing how different cultures interact and the richness that each of them brings. And then I had the good fortune of being in like New York City, which is a melting pot. So everything comes in together. There's like two sides of this coin where growing up in Dubai, it's like the Indians will go to the Indian school and the Indian social clubs and all of that. And then similarly, the Americans, the Japanese, and then, in New York, there's just no separation of that, really. So it definitely allows for this diverse view and to appreciate the importance of diversity and how it creates so much variety and resilience. And I've really felt it genuinely, deeply, that that's something that I've carried, and that definitely being an expat has allowed me to see that. And at the same time, the other side of it is this longing to belong to a place and know this is my home, this is my land. And even though, I'm Indian and we have very deep culture in that space, there's a lot of national pride and patriotism. I don't relate as much to it. I speak my languages. I feel I definitely am Indian. I identify with that, but I know my major homes have not been in India at all. And so, in the wonderful part of regenerative work, especially regenerative work on land, is it's absolutely hyper-local. It starts with recognizing what is so special about us over here. What is the real essence we have in this place? And so there has been this yearning to know what my tribe is, and to know what my place is, where I can rest and know that my children can rest and their children can rest. I don't have children at this point, but that's the kind of deep, almost visceral and very old thing that gets passed in, right? It's not something that's new age. To have this sense of like this tribal belonging. So I've experienced both sides of it, and that's what's even drawn me more to this work, is just to see and experience this pride that people have, and this longing and attachment that you have to a place, and what it creates for you.
And I can't help but wonder if the pandemic isn't also serving us in that way to really think through for ourselves as individuals, like really truly what is important to us right now, and who do we want to have in that world with us, knowing that that we're not operating a status quo, right? Like I know that, for many of us, we had very, very, very busy schedules, and we're going to a lot of different events or conferences or speaking at this thing or that thing, or having very packed calendars. But I'm wondering if that wasn't also a time where we were spread so thinly that we weren't having those meaningful connections, those meaningful conversations where we actually felt like, when you were speaking just now, I couldn't help but, the feeling for me was, what does it mean to come home, right? Like, what does it mean when you have arrived, when you come home? And yes, it's about community, it's about an ecosystem, it's about your network and your tribe, but it's also about the sense that you have when you feel grounded, when you feel healthy, when you feel like, do you know what I mean? Like there's this feeling that comes with it. And I think that may have been missing for a lot of people for quite a while too, in the sense of just, what does it mean to really feel one, not to sound new agey, but to feel one with the universe.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And that work absolutely starts from like within, right? So to quieten down, to actually just be with yourself and with myself has been something that definitely we've in this age at this time, and especially in where we come from, has been subsidized too much.
So as we've been talking, there's a lot of innovation that's happening right now, and wondering, what are you most excited about? Like when you get really excited about your work or the work of others, that are in your tribe, in your ecosystem, in your network, where are you seeing the most excitement coming from?
So what I love a lot about our work is that it happens at the creation, the changes at a systemic scale, right? So it's so large. I mean, we work on 500 hectares and above, but more importantly, it's a very integrated system and fully circular. And the cool part about that is it creates so much opportunity for different aspects, to bring in technology, to bring in knowledge, to bring in data, to bring in humans, and just play with all of it. So, for example, my sister, who's a co-founder of a drone company, we are talking with engaging them to do our monitoring, because it's extremely important. It's a controlled environment, even though it's completely outdoors. We manage the salt content and the water content, and so it's like it's amazing that we have that. And like I said, right, when we tried to do this 18, 19 years back, like watching the things that fell short, that weren't allowing us. Similarly, the carbon market, like the fact that we have a market now to trade carbon, and that companies are at task and we're going to generate gigatons of it, is exciting because there is a value put on it now, and we are learning how to transact in it. And data, the same way, that I think is like the new oil, right? Is there's so much rich data that's going to get generated out of these systems, and we get to work with that and manage that and use that. Even the human aspect, the training of across cultures, like we're going to be working in Somaliland. These are all different languages, people who don't even learn the way you and I learn, in a very, the same classroom context and all of that. And now we can talk about, like, hey, we have all these amazing AI solutions that allow, and VR and AR tech, that'll adapt to that human style and to the human's way of learning. And one of my friends actually works in that. So it's really exciting and cool to have like a canvas where we can have all of these collaborations happening.
For the next generation of women that are launching their careers during COVID, there are a lot of opportunities, but of course, a lot of challenges that come with how do you come of age during this crazy time. What advice do you have for women that may be really interested in a career that's that is, at the intersection of technology and sustainability and, all things related to just ensuring that we are sustainable as as human beings.
Yeah. I think what would excite me if I was coming of age right now, or what I would pass on from watching from here, is that this is a very exciting and unique time where we have developed ways of communicating and technology that allows us to even think and fathom and bring all of this together. And while we were more products of more reductionist, and we got really good at breaking things into blocks and doing it really well, and that'll kind of be the hallmark, right? And that's what the industrial did. I think they sit at the helm of, yes, there's a lot of, literally, we talk about disruption and disruptive forces. That's their context. And along with that comes a lot of creativity as well. That always goes hand in hand, right? So you're not coming after like baby boomers who are like, yay, we've earned a lot, and right? It's like you're coming where you're watching this like unfold and see that it's not working and that it rests in your hands, and that you have these extremely powerful tools of collaboration and cooperation. That really is the time. That is the hallmark of the feminine. That's what we're good at. And so it's great because the timing, the tools, and just where we have now evolved to is calling more and more for that way of being and that energy. And we've been working hard to kind of create the space by way of allowing for equality or diversity or these things to come. We're definitely not there yet, but you can see the glimmer of it, right? Like, take the torch, take the baton, and go is what I'd say.
What you're saying is fascinating, because what I can't help but think about just, healthcare and how, I think that the space of at least Western medicine is starting to become much more aligned with ensuring that, physicians and healthcare professionals are looking at things from like a whole body perspective, a whole systems perspective as it relates to your body, and understanding how it all fits together, as opposed to just treating a symptom or treating a limb or treating one organ, but they're looking at the ways in which everything's integrated. And in the way that you describe, what you just said, it reminds me of that, in the sense of ensuring now that we're moving forward into a world where there's much more of this whole full circle 365-degree approach to how we think about like end-to-end creation and innovation and technology and production and distribution and just consumption.
Yeah.
So it's time for our lightning round. This is the most exciting part of the conversation.
You did not tell me about this, Jan.
I did not tell you about this.
No forewarning passed.
All right, question number 1. If you could describe COVID in 5 words or less, what would it be? No, wait, that's not the right question. If you could describe the year 2020 in 5 years or less, what 5 words would you choose?
Alarming. I'm going to make wake up call 1 word. I'm just going to break the rules. Opportunities, connection, and change.
I like all of that. Wake up call, I think, is very, very striking. Anything that you're binge watching now that you particularly love?
I do particularly love, I'm not particularly proud, is Money Heist. And it's a show that's designed for binge watching, so it's quite bad. It comes with this guilty pleasure of it.
Yeah. And what advice would you give today to your 85-year-old self?
Oh, do everything you can to make sure we make it. And yeah, live and laugh.
That's very, very, very important. Tahera, thank you so much for being with us today, and can't wait to bring you on again for another conversation. Next time we'll plan this so that it tapes and airs after the election, because I'm sure you and I are going to have a ton to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. I'm really fingers crossed. But yeah, thank you so much, Jan. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
The work you do with Mayshad and for this amazing community and opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I'm Jan Mercer-Dahms, the Vice President of U.S. Development during Mayshad. Please, again, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell to stay up to date with all of our notifications. And also check us out on our website, become a member and become involved and engaged. And this is your opportunity to give back to a wonderful group of women and join us on this wonderful journey we all take together. Thank you, everyone. Hello, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to hit the bell to receive notifications of all of our content.